Well, and then over time, Damon, we see, well, at least we perceive that there's been kind of two different camps that have emerged. There's this one that rejects religion entirely, and then one that incorporates it into white nationalism, if you've been speaking. So can you tell a little bit more about that evolution?
Yeah, in many ways, that's an excellent taxonomy because that kind of friction between the
Mm-hmm.
atheistic or agnostic wing of white nationalism and that form of white nationalism that's informed by some religious
Yeah.
point of view, whether it's a version of Christianity or paganism or what have you, continues till this day. But I think a lot of this history is sort of embodied in the journey of Revelo Oliver, who is a professor of classics at University of Indiana, um, but also one of the founding members of the John Birch Society, wrote for National Review. And at that time, he viewed Christianity as, or at least what he called
Mm-hmm.
historical Christianity, European Christianity, as sort of a foundational civilizational framework for Europe and, of course, America following. Um, as his a political journey away from American conservatism, in part because he was purged because of his overt anti-Semitism and racism. As his political journey emerged out of conservatism, especially as formulated by Buckley, and he began exploring these more fascistic options, he also became more critical of Christianity in general. So he began to see all of Christianity, not just liberal Christianity, as a problem. And in particular, in his later work, as something that poisoned the racial instincts of Europeans. Um, Others that followed him, like William Pierce of National Alliance and others, felt that you could have religiosity without Christianity, and that might be okay. But yet others, like Tom Metzger of White Aryan Resistance, felt that this, what they called, quote, spooks in the sky narrative, was a distraction from the
Mm-hmm.
biological necessity to fight a racial war.
Wow, so that's a lot. It's so interesting. So, right now, what would you say the relationship is between white nationalism and religion in our country?
Extremely complicated.
Sure.
Um,
Well, we're here
Yeah.
for it. Let us know.
So in my latest book, when I talk about the relationships between Christianity and the alt-right, what we come down to is that the tensions that I've described up to this point and that I led with in talking about my first book haven't really gone anywhere. It is played a part in splintering the alt-right, though the alt-right was always complex. But whether or not people want to use that as a branding mechanism has been affected by their religious point of view. So, uh, Mormons who were identifying with the alt-right, particularly Alia Stewart, if I'm saying her name correctly, um, she felt that Richard Spencer and others were attacking her Christian faith. And so that became a part of the reason why she stopped using the term alt-right, even though she's still a white nationalist. Carolyn Emmerich developed what she called the folk right because she felt that the pagan sensibilities, to put it that way, the indigenous European religious sensibilities, from her point of view, were not being properly implemented in Richard's atheistic framework. So she breaks from the alt right and founds this much smaller movement called folk right. So all those tensions remain and continue to shape how white nationalists engage with one another.